Friday, everybody. I hope everyone is having a pretty decent day, this last day of the week. So hopefully Fridays are typically good days, at least in a psychological way. I have a clip from Ocasio-Cortez that made my heart sing. And I know that sounds greatly dramatic, but if I am being honest, when I first saw this clip, I was slightly buzzed. Saying I was stoned was probably too strong, but definitely buzzed. I think I saw it yesterday, and it was like this little thing inside of me kind of bloomed. I think it was like joy. Oftentimes when I look at this stuff and I'm looking for clips, there's almost like a clinical distance between the thing I'm looking at. Usually, I mean, don't get me wrong. There's some stories that kind of pull you in, that kind of piss you off, or evoke a response. Those are videos that I love doing. Like, those are the videos where I kind of like get up in the morning for. But oftentimes, it's not always that way. It's not always that connection between whatever you're talking about. And so, through those points, you kind of look at it with a cynical distance as you're judging what do you want to talk about and what do you want to review. I've said before that being pot gets me closer to my heart center, to where I experience that stuff, not always necessarily through my head, but through this kind of emotional part. And as I watched this video, I thought, yes, yes, yes. It's like Spock breaking in the song on one of the Star Trek episodes when he was influenced by like a flower or something. I've been saying this for the last 2 years. Yeah, I guess you can say 2 years at this point. For the entirety of the time that this show has been in existence, I've assiduously stuck to the point that politicians are bought. That for all intents and purposes, both parties, there's this odd expectation that people are going to push back against certain incentives based purely on integrity. That when all of the drivers within the political situation itself lends to a particular behavior, that they're shocked that the particular behavior exists. And in this case, I'm talking about being bought. The viability of candidates is measured in cash. Do you know how weird that is? Like, the viability of a candidate, when news agencies, like CBS, NBC News, when these guys are reviewing politicians, oftentimes the measure and the viability of the candidate in the United States is determined by how much cash the person can raise. Essentially, how bought can this particular person be? And if this person can be really bought, this person is at the top of the list of potentially running. You don't believe me? Why is Beto's name in the running for president of the United States? Beto's name is only in the running because, you know, he looks good. But also, he raises a ton of cash. That is an odd thing. Like, who are the people supposed to be working for? And do you honestly believe, with this much cash sloshing in the political system, that they're working in the interests of the American public? I would put to you that you have systems where these guys need to raise tons of cash. And you have the thing that politicians can leverage, which is policy. So I guess I'm saying this poorly, but it's an investment. They don't look at it as an investment when the people are talking about it in the news. They don't even say it in those terms. But why do we believe that these people who are dumping all of these money into the politicians are just doing so just because they love America? No, they're doing so because they're expecting something in return. Quid pro quo. It doesn't have to be said in those explicit terms, but the incentives are built into the process kind of lends it so. If that politician needs a certain amount of cash in order to get elected, and they're going to need that cash to run, particularly if they're going to run again, they toe a particular line. The incentive and the push is there for the person to lean in a particular direction in order to receive the payment that they're getting. And the problem is when that lean gets to the point where it runs contrary to what the American public put them in that office for. Not to mention completely delegitimizes government. I've said that for the past 2 years. Maybe not in those explicit terms in the way I'm saying it right now. I've said it in explicit terms. I'm just saying I haven't said it in the exact same way. But that has been my mantra Like if I was a preacher, that's be my, my stomping point, my stomping ministry. So for me to hear this come out of the mouth of a politician warmed my heart. And is doing this in this kind of hearing on campaign finance, and in like 5 minutes plays out how to legally buy a politician. Now, from my vantage point, I'm always curious about what takes place behind the scenes. Like, when people of the same ilk are in a particular room and they know all of where the monsters are held, the things that go on behind the scenes that is never exposed to the light of day for the most part, the things, that are talked about in whispers. And they're just in a room with each other and they're having a conversation. What do they say? Like, what's the reality of things? Not necessarily what's being paraded about, but what's the reality of things when they can talk, man to man, man to woman, woman to woman, whatever combination you want to add, but they can talk honestly and openly about their craft, whatever that particular craft is, particularly in the standpoint of politics. It's those things that you don't know unless you're part of the process, unless you're behind the scenes and in the rooms. And not just in the rooms, but in the rooms of the rooms, where the reality of things are held. Somebody runs in a race. There's certain things that they learn about running a race. It's like, as a YouTuber, there's certain things you learn about running a YouTube channel that is not necessarily explicit, that you think of when you first sign up to run a YouTube channel. In this case, though, she's behind the scenes. And she's there with her colleagues, Democrats and Republicans. And she opens a brazen attack on both by going through this thing of how to buy a politician. And how to buy a politician is not specific to Republicans. It is both. It's not one or the other. It's both. I love this. I had off to her on this.
It's all...
And don't get me wrong. Like I said, I've been saying it for 2 years. It's just the point of hearing somebody who's behind the scenes, who's running in a system like this, dissect the problems of this particular system. This video went viral, so fucking great for that too.
Already super legal, as we've seen, for me to be a pretty bad guy. So right. It's even easier for the President of the United States to be one, I would assume.
That's right.
Thank you very much. Let's play a lightning round game. I'm going to be the bad guy, which I'm sure half the room would agree with anyway. And I want to get away with as much bad things as possible, ideally to enrich myself and advance my interest, even if that means putting my interests ahead of the American people. I have enlisted all of you as my co-conspirators, so you're going to help me legally get away with all of this. So, Mrs. Hobart Flynn, I want to run. If I want to run a campaign that is entirely funded by corporate political action committees, is there anything that legally prevents me from doing that?
No.
Okay, so there's nothing stopping me from being entirely funded by corporate PACs, say from the fossil fuel industry, the healthcare industry, big pharma. I'm entirely 100% lobbyist PAC funded. Okay, so let's say I'm a really, really bad guy, and let's say I have some skeletons in my closet that I need to cover up so that I can get elected. Mr. Smith, is it true that you wrote this article, this opinion piece for the Washington Post entitled, "These payments to women were unseemly, that doesn't mean they were illegal"?
Well, I can't see the piece, but I wrote a piece under that headline in the Post, so I assume that's right.
Okay, great. So, green light for hush money. I can do all sorts of terrible things. It's totally legal right now for me to pay people off. And that is considered speech. That money is considered speech. So I use my special interest dark money funded campaign to pay off folks that I need to pay off and get elected. So now I'm elected, now I'm in. I've got the power to draft, lobby, and shape the laws that govern the United States of America. Fabulous. Now, is there any hard limit that I have? Perhaps Mrs. Hobart Flynn, is there any hard limit that I have in terms of what legislation I'm allowed to touch? Are there any limits on the laws that I can write or influence especially if I'm based on the special interest funds that I accepted to finance my campaign and get me elected in the first place.
There's no limit.
So there's none. So I can be totally funded by oil and gas. I can be totally funded by Big Pharma, come in, write Big Pharma laws, and there's no limits to that whatsoever.
That's right.
That is brutal. That is so brutal. Like to have a system that works that way. Understand what's being said here. Assume for the moment, and this is an extreme case, a politician decides he's not going to pay any money for his own campaign. And instead, corporate PACs essentially run the campaign. Now, not necessarily running the campaign in the connection sense, but run ads and put out stuff on his behalf and everything else. Now, of course, he's aware of this. He knows this. He's perfectly aware that this is taking place, even though there may not necessarily be coordination between the two. If he puts out something in the media, the people who are running the PACs know it, and vice versa. Meaning, there are ways to communicate without necessarily going through direct channels of communication. This person gets in office. This person can write whatever law that person wants to write. And that person knows that these organizations are the ones that got him elected because, after all, they're the ones that were putting out ads on his behalf. While he's in that office, there is nothing stopping him from writing legislation that could come directly from the mouthpiece of the corporate PACs that got him elected. Like, I say on this channel all the time that our system is not an act of God, it is an act of policy. And it's an act of policy by people who are doing shit like this. Maybe not to that particular extreme, but it doesn't have to be that extreme. And I would say that extreme will be a little bit more easier to deal with, as opposed to the more insidious nature of the way it goes. Like, you could be aware of how much money people are putting out on your behalf. And in being aware of how much money people put on your behalf, lean in a particular direction. Meaning going further than you would typically go in a particular direction because you're trying to get that particular cash. But there may be limits on how far you can go based on party affiliation. If you're a Democrat, there may be limits on it, just how many people would deal with it. But then again, you have Joe Manchin. So, there's that idea. I guess I'm just making a point that this is a horrible, gross violation of any norms, of democratic norms. Or at least that should be allowed as democratic norms. Because it completely destroys any notion of a democratic process. You're talking about people who are being bought. And that's not one politician. That's not the rare bird politician. This is your political system that she's describing. Let's keep going. I'm sorry to interrupt. She's doing awesome.
Okay, so awesome. Now, Mr. Mirabani, the last thing I want to do is get rich with as little work possible. That's really what I'm trying to do as the bad guy, right? So is there anything preventing me from holding stocks, say, in an oil or gas company, and then writing laws to deregulate that industry and cause, that could potentially cause the stock value to soar and accrue a lot of money in that time?
You could do that.
So I could do that. I could do that now with the way our current laws are set up. Yes?
Yes.
Okay, great. Is it possible that any elements of this story apply to our current government and our current public servants right now?
Yes.
Yes.
So we have a system that is fundamentally broken. We have these influences existing in this body, which means that these influences are here in this committee shaping the questions that are being asked of you all right now. Would you say that that's correct,
Yes.
Mr. Mirabani or Mr. Schaub?
Yes.
Oh, I love that. She says this is acting, directly shaping the questions that are being asked of your committee right now. Meaning the scenario that I've just presented to you applies to the people who are asking you questions right now at this very moment. Oh, God, they're going to hate her guts. They're going to hate her, man. They're going to hate her guts. But yes, this is why you were sent to Washington. This is why you were sent to Washington. I love this.
All right. So one last thing, Mr. Schaub. in relation to congressional oversight that we have, the limits that are placed on me as a congresswoman, compared to the executive branch and compared to, say, the President of the United States, would you say that Congress has the same sort of standard of accountability? Is there more teeth in that regulation in Congress on the president, or would you say it's about even, or more so on the federal?
In terms of laws that apply to the president, yeah, there's just almost no laws at all that apply to the president.
So I'm being held, and every person in this body is being held to a higher ethical standard than the President of the United States.
That's right, because there are some ethics committee rules that apply to you.
And it's already super legal, as we've seen, for me to be a pretty bad guy. So it's even easier for the President of the United States to be one, I would assume.
That's right.
Thank you very much.
That was awesome. That was awesome. I dug that. I totally dug that. More of that. Because I have to be honest, it seems so bizarre to me that if you ask any random person, that person may say, if you ask him, do you believe that your government is bought? Meaning the politicians who you put in that office are bought. They're looking out for interests that are not yours. I think most people say yes. Now, I could be wrong. Perhaps I'm being overtly cynical. That may be true, but I do think I'm right. Which means the secondary question of why are you okay with your politicians being bought? That part blows me away. So I love the fact that she's having this hearing and that she's saying this. Shout out to her on this. Good video. All right, I'm not going to keep this one because I have additional videos that I want to get to. But yeah, this was good. I like this. And by the way, there's one other piece of that. People who leave office and go back to work at a corporation and then come back in the government. Like, it's not just the money. It's also the jobs at the end of the rainbow. You know, the point where you're finally leaving Washington. Like she said, if you want to get rich. So, I'll leave this here. If you guys enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe. You can always support through PayPal or Patreon. Thanks all. Oh, by the way, Patron Appreciation is coming up on Sunday. I forget the time. I think it was like 1 o'clock p.m. Eastern. My wife is going to be joining me. She's going to be my co-host for the Patron Appreciations. In the near future, I don't know how many of these we're going to do, but she enjoyed the State of the Union address message. So she decided she wanted to come on. And I always welcome on. So, not to mention, I think the audience enjoyed it. So, all right, guys. I'll see you in probably 20, 30 minutes or so. I have an additional video after this one. So, thanks all.